It's time for another episode of Espresso Yourself with Chuck. And now, coming to the mic, your host, Mr. Chuck Knapp.
All right. Well, we are excited to have Coach Byron Samuels with us, a friend of the JAG-K program. We had about 300 students who had the opportunity to hear him speak at our Leadership Development Conference at Wichita State University, October 12th. And a lot of students came up to me afterward asking for his contact information because they wanted to reach out to him and I just follow up, I think probably thank him, but also I think maybe get some additional advice. And so I thought it would be great if we could just get him on Espresso Yourself with Chuck and talk about some of the things he mentioned at the LDC, but also dig in a little bit more into some of the other things he does. He has an organization or a program called Think Ahead USA, and I want to visit with him about that a little bit. But first, welcome to Espresso Yourself with Chuck.
Well, thank you, Chuck. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you. I think the world of you and what you're doing in your heart for young people. So thanks for having me.
Well, I see that you're wearing, and thank you for pulling over and visiting with us. You have a very busy schedule, and we appreciate that you were able to fit some time in today and obviously coming out to Wichita. But I see you're wearing an NBA Academy shirt. So I want to talk a little bit about that at some point. But I'd really like to just start with you telling us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, how you got involved in basketball and some of the other things that came along, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, no problem. Well, I am the youngest of 6 children. Grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Probably the biggest influence in my life was my grandmother. My wife doesn't like me to say that, and my mother, and sometimes my kids, but my grandmother taught me my work ethic, taught me the importance of little details. I played high school basketball. I played football. Football, as a matter of fact, was my first love. And I ended up going to college playing high school basketball at UNC Asheville. And I was originally, when I was at UNC Asheville, I was very active in student government and some other clubs. I was a resident assistant. And so I just always stayed busy, sometimes too busy, but I would much rather be busy than not. And for my days at UNC Asheville, I really wanted to become a college professor or work in higher education. And so I've got my degree in management. And it's so funny, coming out of Asheville, it was either go to get your master's degree, PhD, and teach, or in this country, if you can find a product that you can sell, I think you can make a lot of money. That was my thinking back when I was coming out of college. And I interviewed for a couple of pharmaceutical companies, and I didn't get those jobs. And so I just took that as a sign I was going to go to grad school. I'm supposed to be a college professor. Well, on my way, and I was accepted. I was going to go to the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, the Fighting Illini. And on my way to the University of Illinois, I stopped and spent the night in Memphis with a college teammate of mine, ex-college teammate of mine. And as a good Southern boy would do, call back and let my mother know that I'm in Memphis. I'm spending the night at Randy's house, and I'm getting up in the morning and headed to Illinois. She said, call this person, call that person. One person she said call a guy by the name of Randy Smith. I called Randy, and he said, listen, would you want to go to Ireland and play basketball for a year? So after a 10-hour drive from Winston-Salem, North Carolina to Memphis the following morning, instead of making the trek to the University of Illinois, I drove back to Winston-Salem. About a week later, less than a week, I was in Dublin, Ireland, playing basketball. So,
Wow.
and these were the good old days where you could go, and I didn't have a passport. So after driving 10 hours back to North Carolina, I had to drive another 7 hours to Washington, D.C., get a passport, and then drive back to North Carolina.
So at that point, so clearly you made a pretty quick decision to change your path at that point, maybe not the overall path, but
Sure.
what went into that decision of, you know what, I think playing basketball in Ireland would be a great idea. So how did you make that decision?
I have always been fascinated with travel. And I had a brother-in-law, and I just visited with him, and I thanked him, that was in the Navy. And as he would travel all around the world, I'm in high school and college, he would always say, man, there's a great big world out there. See it, go see it, travel the world. So his advice was travel. And then I had other family members, I had an aunt and uncle that traveled quite a bit. And it's like, go see this world. And so it was easy for me to just, because I'd heard that growing up, travel. I'd never been out of the United States at that point. And so I just did it. And part of me, even though I was really fired up about the University of Illinois, they were very gracious to me and accepted me and providing me with monies to go there. I still had that basketball bug in me, still maybe a little bit, as most athletes do. And so that was it. And I don't regret it one bit. Ireland was incredible. And through basketball and connections in Ireland and other places, and I still stay in touch with Jerry and Claire and Doogie and a few other cats from Ireland. You know, and again, that was almost 40 years ago. 40 plus years ago. Well, almost 40 years ago. But it was fascinating. And the one thing I learned in Ireland, and that I continue to learn as I visit other countries, people are the same. People are the same. There's not as many differences as we would make it out to be. People want the same things. They want good jobs. They want their children to be safe. They want food on the table, maybe a little money in the bank, the opportunity to take a vacation. That doesn't change. I've been blessed to have visited 29 different countries, and not just visit, spend some time there, quality time there. And I just say, you know, people really aren't that different. And somehow we make that out to be, well, this and that, those people are that way and those people are that way. And it's just really not that way in my experiences.
Wow. So you mentioned that you got the advice to travel. What was, and maybe it was that, but what was the best piece of advice you ever received from someone?
Wow. I don't know that I can answer that in one. You know, the advice I got from my grandmother, and I mentioned it in Wichita, was, you know, always do a good job, because people will always see what you don't do versus. That was a great piece of advice for me. You know, fast forward to my coaching career, and I was just asked this about a week ago, what would a younger Byron tell himself as he got into coaching? Well, someone told me, said, it doesn't always have to be your way. You know, that was a good piece of advice. The piece of advice about traveling, that was a good, so I just, one piece of advice, I'd have to think about that. You know, as we were getting married, two of my college professors, they were at our wedding, they gave us a plaque. My wife and I have been married 30 years. And on that plaque, it says, No, and no, not the plaque, the card that they wrote says, listen, says you will agree on the big things. It says, don't let the little things tear you apart.
Hmm.
So, and over the course of 30 years, it hasn't been the big things, the raising the kids or the finances. It's always been just the little things that annoy you that aren't worth fighting about, but you fight over them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
anyone that's been married knows what I'm talking about.
Yes. I have been married and am married, and it's been 27 years. So we're behind you, but I would concur. And sometimes it's a little thing, but you make it a big thing.
Yes, that's right. That's right. No, please.
Oh, well, you'd mentioned coaching. And so how did you get into coaching? You went to Ireland, you played, and then did you go into coaching from there, or did you play again internationally, or what got you into coaching? Because obviously that's an opportunity to teach, which is what you said you kind of wanted to do. That was a passion. So how did that all transpire?
Yeah, I got the best of both worlds. When I got back from Ireland, I went back to Winston-Salem, and I was just, okay, I need to reapply to the University of Illinois. I really still want to go back to graduate school. The only reason I didn't go back to Ireland, because they offered me a contract to go back, was just a little small antenna or voice in my head said, remember what you really want to do. Just remember what you really want to do. And that was to teach. And so as I getting ready to do paperwork to resubmit things to the University of Illinois, an old high school coach, AAU coach, called me, and he had just taken a job at Western Carolina University. And he says, Mike Palmer, who is a headhunter now in the Atlanta area, he said, hey, Byron, I know you're planning on going to graduate school. We have a need for a graduate assistant at Western Carolina University. We think you'd be great. You're a former player. You can relate. And so I thought about that. I trusted Mike. I had a good relationship with Mike. And so that's what I did. And it ended up the best of both worlds: coaching, teaching, and selling every day. Every day as a coach, you're selling. What are you selling? Well, you're selling to players, style of play. You're selling to recruits. Hey, this is how our program can benefit you. You're having to sell the administration about your plans, your philosophy, your mission, your roles, and your goals for your program and how it benefits the university. And you're constantly teaching. You're constantly teaching young men. And so I got the best of both worlds. And so that's kind of how I got into coaching, was Mike Palmer calling me and asking me if I wanted to be a graduate assistant at Western Carolina. And it was just meant to be, because while I was at Western Carolina, and it used to be a rival school to UNC Asheville, which are only about 45 minutes apart, I met my wife, I got my master's degree, and I got into coaching. So it was a trifecta for me, making that move. And so, and I haven't looked back since.
I know you shared a story with us at the LDC when you were a younger person. Maybe all of that coaching and being a teacher, if you will, may not have been on your radar when you were young. There was an interaction with an assistant principal you shared with us that it sounded like had some impact on your life. Would you mind telling us that story?
Yeah, Mr. Herman Green, God rest his soul. He is, again, I just shared the stories where I was cutting up in class. I was just a little rambunctious seventh grader, sixth grader, fifth grader, fourth grader, probably all of those years. But by the time I'd gotten to Northwest Middle School, and I was cutting up in a home economics class, Mr. Herman Green sent me down to his office, got my attention, spanked my rear end real good, sat me down, and looked me straight in the face and he said, Samuel, you're a smart kid. You stop being such a cut up and start thinking about going to college. And it just planted a seed. It just planted a seed. And again, mind you, Chuck, I had teachers and administrators in my family. As a matter of fact, my mom used to teach. But no one up to that point had said what Mr. Herman Green said. So he thought enough of me, one, to discipline me, and then two, encourage me. And so that was profound. So maybe, to go back to your earlier question, the best bit of advice, it may have come from Herman Green. Start thinking about going to college. Stop being a cut up and start thinking about going to college. And again, I grew up in a time where I really, in a lot of ways, my fourth grade math teacher lived across the street from my grandmother. I had some history teacher that her husband worked with my mother. All around our circles, I knew our teachers. And if we cut up, or if we did anything that was not proper, it got back to our parents. It got back to my mother. It got back to our family. So teachers, you're right. Maybe through those interactions, I was being prepared to be in the teacher role.
Mm-hmm. When you got to be a coach, you started as a grad assistant, but you worked your way up to be a head coach. So how did that process work? And then at what point did you start to work for the NBA and then kind of pursue some of these other things that you've done here recently?
Yeah, I coached for 30 years. I loved coaching. I loved my kids being around higher education. That was important to our family. I enjoyed the travel. I set a goal, and I'm not even sure. I've always sort of been goal driven, and I look back at notebooks, even from high school and college, about some things that I wanted to accomplish. But I need to go find it and just take a picture of it and carry it with me. In the fall of 1988, I said, I wanted to be a Division I head coach by the time I was 30. And sure enough, I turned 30 in May 3rd, 1995. And I became a head coach at Hampton University in that March, I believe. And but I just worked toward it. So I found mentors. People that were I was impressed with in coaching, and I was able to connect with them and ask them questions. So that would be one thing. Find mentors. Who is doing what you think you'd like to do? See if you can't build a relationship with them, and maybe follow them around, or email, or call, or text, and just ask them questions. And in doing so, I set a pretty high bar for myself, and I was, just blessed to be able to reach it. I want to go back, Chuck, if I can, to a thing that I learned from three people in my college days at UNC Asheville that were really important to me. One was a counselor, Lomax Fonville, Linda Lesnarski, Don Lesnarski. They were professors. He said, Byron, create a board of directors in your life. Create a board of directors. But why do I need it? I'm a college student. Why am I creating a board of directors? He says, no, here's what the board will do for you. List maybe 7 to 10, 12 people in your life that you respect and that you may want to follow in their paths. Or it may be a family member, it may be someone in business, it may be a teacher, but maybe a best friend. And when you have a decision to make, or when you're contemplating an action or doing something, ask yourself, what would my board do? What would my board say? And so you ask those people. And so I'm asking Chuck, and I'm asking my mother, and maybe I'm asking my wife at this stage of my life. Maybe I'm asking, best man at my wedding. But instead of just jumping into something, get outside conversations from your board, an imaginary board, but it's a real board at the same time. Basically, what you're doing, you're soliciting just their thoughts. Now, you don't have to agree with them, because I think you've got to follow your passion. And I think sometimes some input can be too much input. So I think sometimes input can stifle passion, but you want to be passionate and move in the correct direction. So I just wanted to say that, but I was fortunate, worked real hard for 2 years at Hampton University, took to the program from Division II to Division I. My former college coach, Jerry Green, got the head coaching job at the University of Tennessee from the University of Oregon. He had not been in the Southeast, so he basically wanted to put together a staff of guys that had kind of been in the Southeast. And I played for him at UNC Asheville. I told the story about him and General George C. Patton and doers, doubters, and dogs in Wichita. He would be shocked to know that stuck with me all these years. So I went to Tennessee, and from Tennessee, head coach at Radford University. And by the time I was leaving Radford University, I knew there was something else that I wanted to do, and I hadn't found it yet. And so I needed to continue to provide for my family, so I continued to coach. And until I got fired, if you will, for the last time at Florida A&M, and my heart was set that ministry was kind of what I wanted to do. Then an opportunity presented itself to work for Adidas in China. That led to me working with the NBA in China. China's a wonderful place. I would go back tomorrow, just because I think that people are a lot more like us than they aren't. I thought the food was good, and I'm amazed at how they can move 1.5 billion people around so easily between planes and rails and subways, and all the ways they do it is fascinating to me. While I was in China, a dear friend of mine, he knew that, for 5 or so years prior, the conversations that we had, and he's on my board. This is a guy that I talk to regularly. We met, as a matter of fact, going to an AAU event in Arkansas the same year we both got on the road as recruiters. So, we've got this 28-year relationship. And he had a conversation with someone with USAYO, and they were doing ministry in New Mexico area, and they were looking for someone to fill this void. And they thought a coach would be a retired coach, so to speak, would be the perfect person. And again, 3 times I said no, because I was thinking, we were living in Florida at the time, and my wife and I were thinking, hey, if we're going to go anywhere, we're going to move back to North Carolina. My wife is also from North Carolina. But it just wasn't meant to be. And so I just trusted in my heart, trusted in the feedback that I was getting, that this was the right thing to do. I said this in Wichita as well, there are a lot of people have all the answers, but no solutions. I want to try to be a solution, and sometimes in doing so, you have to take chances. And so we moved out here, and then just constantly we're just working with youth groups and youth ministries and the Navajo Nation, I do some substitute teaching just as a way to get to know administrators and teachers, and give me an opportunity to pour into the lives of young people. So, I mean, we've been out here 3.5 years. It's been fascinating. USAYO is an incredible organization, and that's how USAYO led me to you, because at a conference in Arkansas, I met a gentleman that was part of our conference, the mentoring conference in Oklahoma. So it's been a great run, Chuck, and I've been blessed beyond description.
So I heard you talk several times to some of the young men at the conference you and I were attending, and you had an acronym that you used. And I can't remember all the specifics of it. Do you know what I'm referencing?
Sure. When we were in Tampa, Florida, and I was trying to get it started here in New Mexico, just haven't had the time to dig into a nonprofit called Think Ahead USA. And I did some volunteer work at the Salvation Army many years ago in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I just remember going home and I'm talking to my wife, who were newly married, and saying, and I'm really concerned about these kids because it seems like they just don't have, a game plan for what's going on next in their life. And so how can we help them come up with a game plan for their life? And because some of these kids, they just didn't know. And so I won't go into the story of how I came up with the name. Old great Harold Melvin and the Blue Note song, Wake Up Everybody. I guess I did anyway. But there's a line in that song that says, wake up everybody, no more sleeping in bed, no more backwards thinking, time for thinking ahead. And in the song, it talks about the promise of young people and tomorrow. And we've got to do a better job teaching and preaching and living and all of those things. And we just got to do a better job. And so hence Think Ahead USA. And I really emphasize the word think before I even get into the acronym, because I just want to encourage young people to not just go outside the box, but destroy the box in terms of how they think. Let me give you an example. And I hear it from players, my nieces and nephews. Listen, the way that movie stars and rock stars and rap stars and athletes, how they live and think about their life is different than how you should be thinking about your life right now. Just because someone famous says something doesn't make it true, doesn't make it right, doesn't make it correct for you. So learn how to think and reason and discern on your own before you just go with the flow because someone famous said something. Because I think an awful lot of people can get hemmed up, if you will, or trying to think like, how boring would this world be if we all thought the same? So we've got to think differently, but we also have to get information so that we can think better in our situations. So that's the think part, because I think we can get in the herds, and the herds are thinking the same way. But that one little pig, that one little calf gets spared because they just ain't following the herd that day. And so learn how to think, reason, and make the best decision that you can based on the information that's relevant to you. And then, so what are we thinking about? So we're thinking about our attitude. That's the first A in the acronym. think about our attitude. You know, every day is a good day. You know, some are better than others. Let's just say but every day is a good day. That's attitude. So we greet people with a smile, a firm handshake. Be excited about the day. That's attitude. My mother used to drive this home all the time. Your attitude would determine your altitude. Before they put it on posters, before it was best-selling books, I heard it all my life. Your attitude would determine your altitude. Yeah. There's an awful lot for us to be sour about. What's there to be happy about? There's more to be happy about. And so check your attitude. Have an attitude of gratitude. So what else are we thinking about? So think attitude, think hard work. Now, every time I go around shopping or traveling, everybody's got help wanted signs. People are dying to get people to work. And I can't figure it out. I'm not a politician. I'm not a economic person. But I do know this: hard work makes good things happen. So think hard work. Nothing good is going to come your way without hard work. It's a good thing, and it makes good things happen. Okay, so work hard, embrace work. Because sometimes you say it's going to take. You look at. You can look at people sometimes. You're going to take hard work to get there, and they look at you like, I got to work hard. It's like almost like it's a disease or something. It's not. So we've got to embrace this thing, even now, that hard work is a good thing. So that's what we're thinking about. We're thinking about our attitude. We're thinking about hard work. We're thinking about education. We're thinking about a lifetime of learning. I can't tell you what all my economics books or history books or management books said, but I learned in those books. But more importantly, I learned outside of those books in the classrooms, with discussions with teachers, with professors, with classmates, in the debate. And I can't remember who said it. Could have been a founding father, could have been someone else. So there are two educations. There are two educations. One that teaches us how to earn a living, and one that teaches us how to live. Okay, but develop a love for learning. Develop a love for learning. I should tell my teams all the time: learn to listen to learn. Learn to listen to develop a life. So think attitude, think hard work, think education, think accountability. That's the other A in the acronym. Think accountability. All right. No one is responsible for your successes or failures more than you. And most of the time, our successes or failures are something, especially our failings, is because of something that we did or said or didn't say or didn't do. I could talk an hour, Chuck, about the mistakes I've made in my life. And some hardest look is to look in the mirror, right? And do that self-audit. What did Byron do that, created this situation? But we have to be accountable. And then lastly, after we thought about our attitude, we thought about hard work, thought about education, we thought about accountability, we got to think about being determined. We got to be relentless in the pursuit of what we want. So think determination. If you take your eyes off the basket, you can't make it. If you're not looking at the putt, you can't make the putt. If we take our eye off the goal, all we see are what? Distractions and negativity, and you can't, because there are always people that are saying you shouldn't, you can't, it won't work. No. We're going to be determined, and we're going to be focused, and we're going to be committed to this, whatever, goal, dream, aspiration. and we're not going to take our minds off of it until we reach it. And if we fall short, again, we can look ourselves in the mirror and say, I did my best, and let the rest just lay where it is.
Yeah. Well, Byron Samuels, you have been generous with your time. I know you have another commitment coming up that you need to drive to, so we don't want you to be late for that.
Good.
Thank you again for joining us to Espresso Yourself.
You got it. I love that title, by the way. Sure. And let me just add one other thing too, because I love what JAG-K represents, what it is doing, the members of your staff, so many to name, but if I can ever do anything to support what you guys are doing, I'm all in, because I think it's so important and so worthwhile. So I'm so impressed.
Thank you. Travel safe.
Thank you, brother.
We'll be in touch.